Hey there, it's Wendi Freeman, and you are listening to Double Page Spread. I am so excited whenever I hear from you guys. I love to death. You're always more than welcome to send me feedback. Write doublepagespread@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at doublepgspread. Or, I'm on Facebook, just Wendi Freeman. I'm approachable. I love that. Also, thanks so much to our dear friends at DCBS, the Discount Comic Book Service. They're always wonderful, and I hear from so many of you who get your comics through them because, maybe you live in a place where you don't have a great local comic shop. Whatever the circumstances are, people always tell me that they're excited to get their DCBS box every month and what great deals they get from those guys. So check out DCBS, check out their sister site, In Stock Trades, and get the greatest deals on comics each and every month. And also, thank you so much to our dear sponsors at Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. Now, in addition to providing incredible fragrances and hair glosses and nail polishes, all these amazing things, they do a lot of charity scents. So they have one that is raising money for the wildfires, going on in California and so forth. And this particular fragrance is called White Larry. So it's the artwork on it is of this crazy-looking white goat who's sort of a relative of Black Phillip, who is the evil goat from the movie The Witch. So they say the White Larry is the embarrassing, not quite satanic cousin who starts fires. And this scent smells like goat's milk, buttermilk, and butter. Lots of butter. So that actually sounds pretty cool. I'd like to smell like butter. It says, please note this perfume is not vegan as it contains butter CO2 extract. So there you go. If you really want to smell like butter and you want to help out the people struggling from the wildfires, buy some White Larry from Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. And I hope you're doing well. Have a wonderful day. Hey there. Welcome back to Double Page Spread, and I'm your host, Miss Wendi Freeman. Tonight I'm joined by an artist who was brought to my attention by one of my dear friends and longtime listeners, Mr. Jeff Douglas. So I have seen his art, his commissions and things many times on Instagram and all over with his incredible psychedelic style, Mr. Andrew Buck. How you doing?
Pretty well. That was a nice introduction. Thank you very much.
Of course. I see your stuff all the time, and I'm always blown away by you.
Oh, it's much appreciated. That is the idea, so I'm glad you're getting across.
Yeah, Jeff was telling me about how he had gotten, a commission from you, and he was like, yeah, he really does it in marker. Like, you see it bleeding through the page. Like, everything you do is so down to earth in that style.
Yeah, I really kind of want everything to look very handmade. I like that it kind of gives way for little mistakes to happen, and I think too often digital looks a little too perfect. So I think it's nice to see little flaws here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been such a big fan over the past years of people like Michel Fife and Ed Piskor and like these guys who really do sort of bring things back to that original style. That sort of hand-drawn ballpoint pen, magic marker kind of aesthetic.
Yeah, I should say too. Jim Rugg was a huge influence to me because I started seeing some of those like ballpoint pen drawings he was doing with basically dollar store pens, which are some of the most gorgeous pieces of art I've ever seen in my life. So that was basically kind of like allowed me to think, you know what, it's going to use markers and it's going to be fine.
Exactly. You can spend thousands of dollars on a set of every Copic marker color under the sun, but sometimes you just need to get back to the Crayola.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the origins of your artistic style. When did you start drawing?
So actually, I've been drawing for a very long time. And for most of my life, I actually did very kind of photorealistic stuff. And was not really a big fan of my own work, so to speak. I thought it was fine, but wasn't really inspiring to me personally. And then about 5 years ago or so, I started from scratch and just dropped the photo references and started to go insane, I guess.
Well, your stuff has this very, very larger-than-life sort of 60s like, obviously there's the Kirby influence. Obviously there's like some Steranko or some Ditko, like this very sort of psychedelic feeling to it. Was there something that kind of made that shift for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the artwork that appealed to me. Like that's what I was visually kind of drawn to. So I just kind of finally made the connection. You know, I was making art that wasn't necessarily what was going to draw me in. So I started just kind of working much more in the style that I found more appealing. Just the kind of larger than life, just totally, you know, I mean, hopefully people aren't bothered by this, but like stuff that's just not realistic. That's kind of what I really enjoy, just kind of more pure style kind of thing. So that's what I tried to emulate and kind of go for.
Yeah, you went the polar opposite. You went from hyper photorealism to nothing realistic at all.
Yeah, pretty much. Every once in a while, I do just draw something that's a little too realistic for my own taste, but you know, I try to stray from that when I can.
But you do like, you know, you do pictures of people. Like I've seen you done, like you did a Videodrome piece, or you did something else. So you do things where you have to reference people.
I do, but I try to not. I don't really. I try not to feel any kind of real responsibility to. So if I was doing Videodrome, I wouldn't feel the need to draw James Woods. I would be interpreting the character he plays, kind of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, I try to still make it my own, while still staying true to the source material.
So let's talk about Satani-Kill, which is the comic that you self-published. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
So essentially it is, well, I guess the real kind of genesis and origin of it was just kind of playing around, and I'm sure anyone who's followed me, or if you start following me from this point forward, you would see this kind of weird kind of spaceman kind of floating Easter Island head that I started drawing, which I kind of started calling my like cosmic Lucifer. So from that point forward, that became the genesis of like, I want to tell stories surrounding this kind of weird thing I've kind of created. And I also wanted to create a superhero comic that was not a typical superhero comic, and in that it's not so much of kind of the typical, for lack of a better term, just kind of the macho kind of power fantasy kind of thing. I wanted to be a little bit more about searching and kind of the strangeness of what it would be like to suddenly be thrust into this new identity. So overall, I think it's this bizarre psychedelic search for identity, the search for meaning, search for self, and kind of all mixed in with what happens when you suddenly are confronted with a higher level of consciousness as well. So you're also trying to make sense of the universe you are in.
So how much of you let's talk about sort of this idea of like you really tap into these metaphysical sort of larger grand scope kind of things. And I feel like obviously like Grant Morrison does that. There are a lot of people who sort of do that. But where did you get these feelings from?
So I would say maybe 12 years ago or so, I started getting really heavily into meditation. So a lot of it's kind of based on that, and kind of through meditation, these experiences with kind of higher levels of consciousness, or maybe not even higher, just different levels of consciousness. And kind of placing that in there. I'm also very interested in kind of the Gnostics and that idea and kind of the mythology surrounding that. So that kind of played a lot into it as well, especially like obviously the use of like one of my characters, the Demiurge. So I mean, that's pretty much that Gnostic giveaway there.
So who are some of the writers that you follow?
So big ones for me, actually. I mean, as far as comics go, like Grant Morrison was a big influence, and artistically, but also especially as a writer, I actually think Tom Scioli is pretty brilliant as a writer. Frank Miller too actually was a huge influence for me as a writer. Most of my writing influences are actually filmmakers, like David Lynch, Jean-Luc Godard. That's kind of who I identify with as kind of a writing style, I suppose.
Did you ever see those David Lynch pieces of art where, like, he would dissect a chicken or something? He'd, like, dissect a fish, and then he'd make it like it was, like, a model. Like, he'd make, like, a little puzzle about it where he'd mount, like, each piece of the animal onto a paper, and he'd be like, this, you know, insert slot A into tab B or something. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, it was the fish kit and the chicken kit, yeah.
Yeah!
Yes, I'm familiar with those, yeah.
I'm fascinated by David Lynch as an artist because I feel like he works in those mediums where like he works with things that decay. Like he'll use medicine ointment, or he'll use things that like don't hold up over time. So it's like his art pieces are so much more about something as you're watching it evolve and destruct.
I think it's very much about texture. So I think, as things tend to decay, they tend to become a lot more rich in texture. So I always kind of joke that Eraserhead is kind of texture, the motion picture.
Right. I admit I gave up on the new Twin Peaks.
Oh no. That's not good.
I mean, if you want to sell me on it, I'm into hearing about that.
I actually just watched the entire thing for, I think, maybe the fourth time. I just finished watching it last night, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I am. I think it's maybe. It might be my favorite thing ever, actually.
Well, that's awesome. Because I was obsessed. I forget. I remember I was in high school when the original came out, and I had a history teacher, and I would go and I would talk to him obsessively about Twin Peaks every week. And I remember when the videotapes came out and they had that log box set, and I saved up all my money for it. I was really, really excited about it.
I think maybe it could be different for me too, because I got interested in David Lynch, and at a point where no video store around me had Twin Peaks rent. So my only Twin Peaks was Firewalk with me for a very long time. So I saw that long before I saw any other Twin Peaks. So I think the film certainly is a lot more intense and a lot stranger than the series to an extent. So I think maybe that's kind of why maybe the newer season appeals to me a little bit more, because it's definitely more in tone with Firewalk with me than it is the original series.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, so much of it was just so radical for ABC at the time, and to have something that just kind of meandered like that, with stories just kind of went wherever they went. And then also you can tell in season 2 when when Lynch was stepping back and it was more about Mark Frost, it kind of went off the rails a little bit.
I think too. I don't even know if it was so much. I think Mark Frost kind of stepped away a bit too, and it was suddenly writers who were just traditional television writers who didn't really get it. They just thought it was this goofy show. So yeah, let's have a whole thing dedicated to the pine weasel, which is my personal low point of Twin Peaks, is the mention of the pine weasel.
My personal low point is Major Briggs's UFO storyline.
I would almost agree with that, but I think it was just mishandled. I think there was something to that. I think they could have really played with the idea that UFOs were kind of the cover story for what was really going on in the woods, but I think they didn't have people who were clever enough to do that at the time.
Right, it was very pre-X-Files, it didn't quite know how to manipulate.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and then, this new, the revival, there was, what was it, the one episode that was just dedicated to a nuclear explosion?
Yes. Yes, the kind of breaking down the walls of reality. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm a big fan of it, so, that series was a huge influence on Satani-Kill as well, because that had started airing as I was writing the first issue, and that kind of really, that Twin Peaks: The Return basically just, I was like, all right, so I guess there are just no rules anymore. We're just doing anything we want at this point, and just go with your vision, and who cares what anyone thinks or has to say about it, or how much it strays from what's traditional. I'm just gonna forge ahead and do whatever I think needs to be done in the moment.
Following all of these classic sort of writers, obviously David Lynch is deep into meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it always makes me wonder, are drugs necessary for any sort of consciousness altering, do you think? Or do you think meditation entirely can do these things?
I think meditation alone can do it. I think that just from my own personal experience, various psychedelic experiences, whether it is, traditional kind of, plants or substances or meditation or even, something like a dance or kind of a trance type thing. I think they're all keys to different gateways, but I don't necessarily know that you need to experience them all to get exactly what you need. I think you can get there. Yeah, I think basically you're born with the tools you need to get there, and just there are other things that can open those doors as well. But yeah, I mean, the most intense psychedelic experiences I've ever had personally have all been through meditation. So,
how long do you generally meditate for every day?
So I've gotten a little out of the habit. I don't do it every day anymore, but when I do, I go typically at like a half an hour is really what I like to shoot for, and if I have the time, I like to do an hour.
Because I mean, I practice Buddhism, and I chant, you know, like, so
Yeah.
in my practice we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and so like I chant, it's like it gets you into this sort of you know, this very rhythmic frenzy where I feel that I'm, you know, like that's when I'm most open to things. And I don't know if it's a similar thing, but
No. I mean, like it's like I was saying before. I think that's a way to get there. Certainly, I think there's different. I don't think there's a certain direct route. I think you've got to kind of find what works for you and how you can kind of get there. I do complete stillness and like total silence. So I don't do things like wiggle my tongue in my mouth when I'm meditating, and I don't like wiggle my eyes behind my eyelids. I try to maintain as much stillness as possible, and just kind of use my breathing to kind of regulate any of those uncomfortable moments. Or if my leg starts to fall asleep, I just try to change my breathing a little bit, and then just kind of let I don't know, whatever that little secret part of your brain is that's in there, click on and kind of go to work.
yeah, see, that's amazing to me because I cannot endure the idea of being still. Like it's such a hard. But once again, it's just something you have to master, you know. Like when I do yoga, I can focus on breathing, you know. But for some reason, if I'm sitting still, I can't focus on breathing. But yeah, chanting works for me too because it's just like a constant sort of motion to me. So.
Well, I think that's a misconception a lot of people have too about things like meditation is they think, you know, oh, you have to sit down and keep your mind totally clear. And it's like, no, you find the tools to get there. So chanting would keep you from, you know, thinking about the everyday minutia that would keep you distracted normally. So that's how you kind of open up those gateways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Also, it opens up my sense of wisdom because I know that, you know, I could have this one thing that I'm chanting about, this one prayer that I have in my mind, and I'll let my mind kind of wander, and eventually it will come back to a different solution. You know, so it's like you have to kind of have the openness to let the path take you where it's taking you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little about kind of letting go of that control. I think we're all trained to think we need at all times in our day-to-day life.
You need to let go.
Exactly.
Another person you and I are both fans of is Kenneth Anger.
Yeah, Kenneth Anger, I think, to people who are fans of Kenneth Anger, I think his influence is pretty obvious in my work, and that it's very based on quick bursts of image.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's talk about
especially the storytelling in my comic. I think it's just those little, like, quick cuts, and I almost think of my comics as like a slideshow to be read quickly and seen rapidly, and then worry about thinking about it later.
Which is also something very, very Buñuel and very, very much of that sort of art films of that time. What was the first Kenneth Anger film that you were exposed to? How are you exposed to his work?
So, for me, I was literally, a long time ago, I was reading a book about, the Sex Pistols, and before one of the shows they were doing, there was some secret show, I don't know what the location was, but it was in 76, so before, you know, the whole thing kind of happened, and, prior to them playing, they mentioned that they played this film, Scorpio Rising, by this guy, Kenneth Anger, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool, and that was the first time I'd heard about it, and then, I didn't actually see, or this is kind of pre-internet, so I didn't really, it was hard to track it down. I didn't know anyone else who'd ever heard of this guy or that movie. So I used to shop out of, like, you know, bootleg catalogs a lot in the 90s, and I finally found the name Kenneth Anger, and the one that they had was Invocation of My Demon Brother. So I bought that one, and that was the first one I did, in fact, see.
Right, it was so weird because I mean I ordered his stuff like without knowing anything through catalogs too because like it just sounded crazy, you know. I was like,
well, that's kind of what we had to do. You know, it was just like I guess that name sounds cool. Let's go for it.
Right, exactly. And it was so funny because
Yeah.
like I ordered a copy of Scorpio Rising, or I ordered a copy of whatever it was, and I just remember like feeling like I had to show this to someone, you know. But then it blew my mind later on when I was upstairs, you know, I was at my grandmother's house and I noticed her copies of Hollywood Babylon, and I was like, that can't be the same.
I was very surprised too. I never paid attention, but I was aware of the book Hollywood Babylon, that it was this kind of like, you know, legendary kind of sleazy Hollywood book, and I had no clue it was, you know, I obviously didn't know the name Kenneth Anger, so I didn't attach that to it, but over time it was kind of like, I guess that is the same guy. That's kind of strange.
Right, like it just blew my mind that somebody writing this sort of like trashy, sleazy, kind of Hollywood gossip kind of stuff was also doing this weird, mind-blowing, avant-garde imagery stuff, and
Yes.
you know, and then to read more about him, and yeah, like he was, you know, it's just so funny, that weird sort of disconnect. But you've said it too, like he really mastered how to use pop culture so well in these films, using music and those things.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I mean, Scorpio Rising is obviously the best example of it because of its use of pop music. But I mean, you really do kind of question what some of these songs are actually about once you see them combined with some of these images. My personal favorite is the "I Will Follow Him" sequence, because it really is kind of like, yeah, the song really does sound like it's about a cult leader.
What are some of the other films that blew your mind when you were growing up?
So one of them was Eraserhead. I saw that when I was pretty young. I think I was maybe 12 or 13 the first time I saw that movie, and I wasn't aware of David Lynch. I mean, that was like right after Twin Peaks had probably stopped airing, and but I, you know, that was not on my radar at that age. And I remember seeing it. I actually thought it was like a movie from the 40s, because I had seen, you know, some silent films and some expressionist films at that point. And I had no idea that this was a guy who was still making movies, or that this movie was in fact made in the 70s. It just very much had the vibe of another time period. So that was a big one for me. And also, I'm a big fan of Nick Zedd's work as well. Specifically, his film War is Menstrual Envy is kind of one I really, really enjoy. So, yeah, just a lot of that super low budget, really underground kind of stuff is very appealing to me.
I remember when the Blue Velvet trailer would air on television. I remember seeing the commercial for Blue Velvet like late at night. I had to be really young. I don't remember when, you know, obviously I know when it was. I don't know what year that was, but I lived in like the New York area, and it would air on TV late at night. I just remember feeling like terrified of it for some reason. And I thought Blue Velvet, I thought this must be like the most horrifying film ever. And then you see like that imagery of Dennis Hopper, and I thought like, geez, this must be like the craziest, like scary film. Yeah. And then you see it, it's just like, I mean, it's super strange, but I mean, that was like the thing, that was one of the first things that really, really touched me in life, was Blue Velvet.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, I mean, to me, I think Frank Booth is probably like the most terrifying character who's ever been on screen. There's something very kind of real about him that you kind of think he's really kind of out there in the world somewhere. So there's just that kind of primal, kind of sinister paranoia that there is a Frank there somewhere.
Yeah, and also Cronenberg did a lot for me as a young person. Like Videodrome and Scanners were both very, very pivotal in just like unsettling me as a child, you know, like knowing that there was something out there. I feel like the key to all these films is like, it makes you feel as though there is some sort of creepy underbelly out there that I felt like I was too young or too white bread and to ever understand, you know.
I think for me, just kind of growing up when I did, and kind of I was very interested in horror movies. So to me, it's like, I didn't get to see a lot of that kind of stuff until I was a little bit older, but the stuff that was really just kind of gave me a similar thing was like when I rented something like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, expecting it to be like, you know, Friday the 13th, but it's this really like realistically violent film, and I was like 10 years old, and I remember just being like sick to my stomach, and I was not like okay for like a week after seeing that thing.
It's funny, like I've been reading reviews of that new Lars von Trier film, the House that Jack Built.
Yeah.
Do you have any hardcore opinions on von Trier?
You know, I actually kind of haven't seen any of his movies for quite some time. kind of, I think, the last one I saw was actually Dogville, and I kind of got sick of doing that to myself. It's very emotionally taxing. I found it very, very difficult. And I do actually want to see that movie. It does look very good, and I do at some point want to catch up on the rest of his movies again. But I think of a movie like Breaking the Waves and how I don't really ever want to experience that again. It was just too much for me. It's just too emotionally taxing. So, I need to maybe be in a better place in my life and prepare myself a little bit more before I can jump back into that pool.
It's the Requiem for a Dream. Like, I've seen it. I'm good.
Yeah.
I went through that. It's okay.
Yeah, the one movie I got stuck seeing a lot because I had just bought it based on the rave reviews of this film was Irreversible. So I had that movie, and then all my friends had heard about it, and they were like, "Whoa, so everyone who comes over to my place was like, let's watch this." So I ended up watching it like 6 times in like the span of like 2 months, and I'm just like, okay, I think I just gave it to somebody at some point because I was like, this is not something I need to see again. Like, it's just enough for me.
It's funny because I love Vincent. I love Monica Bellucci. Like I went into this movie like really wanting to see them like be erotic together. That movie is just so horrific on every level. Yeah, I'm not a Gaspar Noé fan. I just can't,
I mean, so he's kind of conflicting for me because I do think he's very progressive in his style of filming. It's just the subject matter is so brutal and just so it's very challenging. And I think I will say I do think he has a little bit of style over substance to an extent, and I do think he does like the shock value quite a bit. But I do think the guy does have the skill to be an excellent filmmaker. But there's a little bit of a disconnect there for me.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely talking about this idea of like what is the modern transgressive cinema. I think that's interesting, and yeah, it's funny. I remember when a Serbian film came out, and I had I'd acquired a copy because of course that was like the shock value thing of the time, and everybody was like, "Oh, we've got to watch it. We've got to watch it." It's like, no, I don't want to watch this again.
That was another one. So in high school for me, it was definitely like, I think the 90s rite of passage for people my age or, people into horror movies was Cannibal Holocaust. So you found someone who got a copy of it. I bought a copy of it, and then I watched it the one time, and I remember I was like about halfway through it, and just a friend randomly came over and knocked on the door, and they're like, "How's it going?" And I was just like, "It's not going good," and just kind of like sent them off because I didn't want to deal with someone at that point. And then at that point, I did give it to my friends and made them watch it by themselves without me. So that someone else could be as horrified as I was.
To this day, I've not seen Green Inferno. Like, I have less than no interest in seeing Green Inferno. I'm like, I've seen Cannibal Holocaust, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Another movie like that was Wake in Fright, the Australian film that was on the video nasty list, like, forever and ever. And I always read...
I still have not seen that film, but I would like to at some point in time.
Let me tell you, you don't need to. It's really, really boring. It's super boring. The reason why it's shocking is because there's like a graphic kangaroo, murder where they brutally, murdered this animal on screen. But like,
okay.
It's just, so it's like
okay. So I guess I'll pass on that one.
Yeah, you can totally pass on this. But the rest of it is just like this very, very boring story about like this school teacher with a drinking problem or whatever. It's just it's monotonous, and then you get a violent animal murder, and then it just goes on. It's really boring.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I do like to avoid animal murder on screen when I can, so I'll take that advice.
And I was thinking the other day about how one of my all-time favorite sort of people in sort of the occult mythos is Jack Parsons, the guy who is the famous scientist and jet propulsion expert and so forth, who followed Aleister Crowley, and I was so excited that CBS has finally made a TV show about him.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I still haven't had a chance to try and check it out, but that's definitely interesting. I think he is certainly, a great subject for something. There's a lot of strangeness that kind of surrounds him completely. So
Right, and I mean, he was really good looking, and he was this like super genius, and he was involved in the occult. And so for years, I've always been like, why do we not have a movie about Jack Parsons? And then the like
I mean,
sequels.
I do think it is. There is a fear of kind of presenting the occult to a mainstream audience. I think that really is kind of what holds it back. You know.
Well, do you feel like it's kind of a rehashing of that sort of satanic panic idea of the '80s? Like people are afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a large extent, I mean, I don't really know if that ever actually went away. I think there's a huge portion of the country that still, like, really does think there are these, like, packs of Satanists out there who are, murdering children and what. I mean, it's not that uncommon of a conspiracy theory that, there are plenty of people out there who think, Hillary Clinton, like, drinks baby blood, like, legitimately. Like, they buy this into this notion. So I think, that's, it's still very scary to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was also fascinating that era of people believing that they had tapped into these memories. You know, that whole trend of people having these false memories of being like sexually abused by Satanists when they were little. You know, that was a whole strange thing in the '80s.
Yeah, there is a book that's really great, and it's actually just called Satanic Panic, and it's kind of about that, and it's really just the way these kids would be kind of interviewed is they would just kind of ask these kids like, "Oh, do you know about Satanists?" And a kid might say, "Yeah," and then they just kind of go from there. The kids aren't really giving descriptive things; they're just kind of agreeing with what these adults are saying because they think it's what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty interesting. I actually having grown up in the '80s and being fairly unsupervised and watching lots of daytime television, I was I wasn't raised religious by any means. I didn't believe in God, wasn't raised to or anything like that, but I did firmly believe that there were people who were Satanists who would kill me. And it was a major sense of paranoia to, 7 or 8 year old me. Like if I was playing outside and I saw literally if I saw a black van, I would run and hide. That's how afraid I was.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. I feel
Yeah.
like the '70s are very, very much about UFOs. Like my mother is a big believer. Like she's seen UFOs and all this stuff has happened. And the '80s are all about satanic panic. And then I feel the '90s were about this irrational fear that skinheads are going to turn your children. Because I remember that was like a big fear. Was like, roving packs of skinheads were gonna, and get your children involved in crazy activities or something. Like there was always like a fear about that.
Yeah, or just, generally, it was gangs, like think of all like the really cheesy kind of like sitcoms that would have like a special episode about someone who might have to join a gang, kind of like all of that guy. So yeah, I think it was just your children being stolen from you in general by like some violent group of outsiders.
It's just changed. It's changed. It goes from aliens to Satanists to racists or to gangs,
Yep.
It's the same inherent fear.
Yes.
That's funny. So what else? What else do you want to tell me about like your art and what you've got coming up and what you're working on and
So right now, so I just finished issue 5 of Satani-Kill. There's going to be one more issue of that. Satani-Kill is the first part of the Lucifer trilogy, as I'm kind of calling it, and the second portion of that is just going to be one kind of longer book, probably 50, 60 pages-ish. And that one is actually, I've actually already drawn the whole thing. I just need to do some editing and finish the writing on it. And then there will be a third part at some point after that. The second part is called Lucifer's Loving Light. It's kind of a crazy, like bizarre outer space adventure. It's not a superhero comic at all. And it just kind of deals once again with this kind of search for this Lucifer entity. Yeah, and then other than that, just, the typical lots of commissions, lots of drawing, lots of big, bright images.
Where do you see yourself kind of going with stuff? Do you eventually do you want to work for Marvel or DC, or do you just want to keep putting out these incredible things that you're doing?
Honestly, I think unless there's some massive change in the industry at some point, I think that do Marvel and DC have characters I would like to use? Yes. Do I want any kind of creative constraints when I try to use those characters? No. So not really, I guess, would be the answer. But I also think that, the way I draw with my style, like no major company would touch me, I don't think. And I certainly think that a mainstream audience would be horrified by what I do. I just kind of think I was one of these, I think there's a trend. I do follow mainstream comics as well, but I definitely think unless you're doing kind of a more kind of air quotes realistic style and you're drawing a lot of seams and a lot of cross hatching, you're kind of viewed as like lazy or talentless. And I think I would definitely fall into that category to the average comics reader. But that's fine, because I think there's lots of people like me who are kind of sick of that stuff and would rather see a more unique kind of style. So.
Well, I mean, I'm still blown away they let Tom Scioli do things with, like, Transformers. I'm still blown away.
That is crazy. Yeah. I mean, there are rare exceptions here and there. But yeah, I mean, to me, like, if I were running these companies, like one of the first things I would do is, like, one of my dream things I would love to see would be a Ben Marra Thor comic book. Like, I think he's just, like, built for that book, and it would just be fantastic.
Right, and like, was it Michelle Pfeiffer has G.I. Joe coming up? I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, so like I said, there is an audience out there. Like, I'm very surprised that there isn't more of a willingness through kind of like a Marvel or DC to tap into some of these kind of, I don't know, I guess kind of more outsider kind of artists or more of these kind of indie style artists. But, I mean, I think there's, it's very corporate, so they like to have a house style, so to speak. But I don't know, when I was younger, like, I was thrilled to see, like a Bill Sienkiewicz draw something. It was just so different and so strange that it was like, this is amazing. Like, why isn't there more of this out there?
So tell me about where we can find you on message, on social media, and how people can get commissions from you, and where we can see and talk to you more.
So I would say, just search, so I'm on Instagram, is probably the best place to find me, and just look for Novotny Kit, NOVOTNY all one word. You could probably do it by searching in for Buck too. I don't know. Novotny Kit's probably the way to go. And then, I'm pretty open for commissions and that kind of thing. And, even if you don't want that, just look and enjoy, and I'll know at least someone enjoys what I'm doing as well. So that's helpful too.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was quite fun, so thank you.